So here's the short answer. Convert the G line into an extension of the B line. Now here's the long answer. LA Metro Rail is a relatively young and slow-growing transit system that doesn't really move many riders. LA and the surrounding metro area is all about driving all the time. Outside of the few older neighborhoods and outlier projects, the LA mega region mainly consists of wide roads, parking lots, and large shopping centers, leaving everything very spread out. It makes developing an efficient transit system with high ridership extremely difficult, so they say. More rail and more stations have to be built to attain coverage and serve more people, as what has commonly been spread amongst transit enthusiasts about LA. Therefore, transit projects have been mainly focused on expanding the network and densifying areas near stations. There is certainly merit to these arguments, but let me provide some data. The Stockholm Metro in Sweden has 100 stations over 65.7 miles of track, and in 2017 had 353 million riders. The LA Metro has 101 stations over 115 miles of track, and in 2017 had 112 million riders. However, by 2019, so still pre-pandemic, the numbers had gone down to 93 million, which is just not good enough. And before everyone goes into the comments to correct these numbers, I already know what you're going to say. Many of you will know that those numbers don't take into account the K line or the regional connector but have been built since. And to that, I'd say the K line is on course to having only around 600 to 700,000 riders this year. And while it still hasn't opened its LAX station or connected to the C line, which will certainly dramatically increase ridership, LA Metro's estimates say this will be up to 12 million annual riders by 2035. That brings you to 124 million riders using 2017's ridership, so you've hardly closed the gap to Stockholm's numbers. And then there's the regional connector, which Metro projects by 2035 will only add a little more than 6 million passengers per year, and up to 32 million including current transit users using the new link. Remember, LA needs 200 million riders to match the Swedish capital, which, by the way, has a metro population of just 2.4 million people compared to LA's 4 million within city limits, which doesn't include Long Beach, Santa Monica, Culver City, Pasadena, and the San Gabriel Valley, which are all along the Metro Rail. While something like the regional connector is a good project with promising results, what's clear is that LA is having to fight a major uphill battle, but density isn't the only problem. Stockholm is about 63% denser than LA, but it's currently outpacing LA transit ridership by over 300%. So clearly, there is something going on beyond just density. And as an LA resident that's used the metro a number of times, the problem lies in the quality of service. While Metrorail runs 6 rail lines and 2 bus rapid transit or BRT lines, only 2 of these lines actually have complete right-of-way, which are the 2 subway lines, B and D, or the red and purple lines. I say 2, but it's basically 1.5 as of now, although the D line will famously be extended in the near future, which again is a good project. The problem with these lines is the safety and comfortability. Metro knows this and is replacing the current old gross fleet with these newer trains that look much more future-proof. While there is security at stations, there is still a very high likelihood that you're going to deal with some form of degeneracy while on the train. Some very intimidating and unpredictable people will find their way on, and this can result in a feeling of danger while taking the subway. And even though no one wants to be the one that says this, it's deterring riders. Yes, you as a single young person might say, what's the real problem, and deal with it. But imagine you have a family, you're on a date, or you're carrying valuable items. The average person would rather drive in the comfort of their private space in their cars. They don't have to deal with people blasting your speakers or shouting or acting recklessly. If LA is ever going to have high ridership, people need to feel safe using their services, whether it's inside the station, outside the station, or in the train car. I cannot stress how make or break this is. You can spend billions on new lines and tunnels, but no one will ever take it if they feel like it's too much of a risk. And I promise you that when you speak to LA residents and ask why they don't take public transit on trips where they could have, the first answer is always most commonly in relation to safety. But the second answer is convenience. The B and D lines in this regard are fine actually. They're subways, they're fast, no traffic to worry about. But this cannot be said for the A, C, E, and K light rail lines. These lines are not grade separated, so because of this, they can't go full speed through intersections, and more crucially, they end up stopping at red lights all the time. Imagine spending billions on a new rail line, having train cars with dozens of people on, and stopping at a red light so that 4 or 5 cars can turn left. This is the key to why ridership is so low on Metro. People usually take the mode of transport that will get them from A to B in the quickest way possible. So you're not exactly helping yourself when your train is spending so much time at a complete standstill waiting at red lights. Let me give you an example. The E line goes from downtown to USC and connects with the K line, which goes to Inglewood, Crenshaw, and eventually LAX, through Culver City, and terminates in Santa Monica. Those of you in LA will know especially how crucial a corridor that is, and Metro should be gaining tons of riders just from this line. But the problem lies in the speed. The train can go up to 55 miles per hour, which is fine, but the average speed of the line is a pathetic 19 miles per hour. The subway lines average in the low 30s by comparison, and in comparison to cars, the journey from downtown to Santa Monica can be as low as 20 minutes in off-peak hours and up to an hour at the peak. The train ride is usually 45 minutes, but this does depend on how many red lights you hit. So the line is more convenient potentially during rush hour, but at all other times of day, the car is significantly faster. In this one video of an E-line journey, around 6 minutes is seen spent stopped at red lights. And when you consider the lost time from decelerating and accelerating, as well as slower speeds through intersections, you're looking at up to 10 minutes lost purely from slowing down for cars and traffic lights. A 35-minute journey in this corridor versus 45 minutes is the difference between Metro being more or less convenient than driving, and is the gateway to ridership. So instead of spending $3 billion on extending the E-Line East or $17 billion on the Sepulveda Pass subway, maybe spend a whole lot less on just making the current lines better. Even the K-Line, which just opened up in 2022, has to stop for car interchanges. So LA is clearly not learning its lesson from Metro's failures in gaining ridership. But the worst offender of this has to be the G-Line BRT in the San Fernando Valley. As someone who's taken this line several times, it makes the 6 minutes at red lights seem like a dream compared to what happens on the G-Line. It's fair to say that literally half the time on the bus is spent at red lights. Some of you might be questioning this as stopping at traffic lights is normal for buses, but this BRT was actually built on a dedicated trackway that used to be a freight rail line, so it almost functions like a train line, except that it's a vehicle on wheels. In fact, Metro has plans on eventually converting the G-Line into its own light rail line for up to $2 billion. But by 2051? Metro is aware of the travel time issues and plans on grade separating the G-Line by 2027 for $600 million. And Metro projects that this will decrease journey times by 30%. However, I have a much more radical idea, and one that I think is actually not that unrealistic and makes a lot of sense. If you look at the Metrorail map, the G-Line looks like it's simply a continuation of the B-Line. So, rather than grade separate the G-Line and convert it into its own light rail line, as is planned, why not just convert it into an extension of the B-Line? I mean, they're going to be installing rail anyways, right? This way, it removes a transfer for all those across the valley coming into Hollywood and downtown, slicing significant amounts of time in their journey. And a separate light rail corridor is much more redundant, given how each line directly feeds into each other. This is especially the case because the way that the B-Line is aligned, there's nowhere else for it to go that's worth the billions to extend it. Going north to Sun Valley or to Burbank Airport seem like okay ideas, but these areas are already served by Metrolink for services to downtown, and these would be expensive projects without much gain in terms of reach or ridership. By using the G-Line corridor, for relatively little money, you can extend the subway all across the valley as a mostly overground and elevated suburban extension without much hassle as compared to other projects of the same magnitude, and making the B-Line a true east-west line. Think about it, Metro already owns all the land, which is easily wide enough to fit tracks and all necessary infrastructure, and if LA is about to grade separate the G-Line anyways, they might as well turn what really shouldn't be a BRT at that point given the insane amounts of infrastructure around it, especially once there's bridges and elevated stations, and provide what would be the best possible option for passengers, for Angelenos, full Metro service. Given that converting the line into light rail was estimated to cost $2 billion, and the grade separation is $600 million, I don't see how converting the G-Line into the B-Line would cost much more than that. The only added cost would be getting the B-Line to turn west and emerge overground to Laurel Canyon Valley Village Station, but it wouldn't make much sense if this project were to cost more than, say, $4 billion, And I don't think there's ever going to be an opportunity to extend a subway line 16 stations across an extremely important corridor for this low of an amount ever again. For comparison, the D line extension will add just 7 stations and cost $8.2 billion. Metro lines extending overground into suburbs is an extremely common feature all over the world, from London to New York to Washington, D.C. And in the latter's case, in suburbs far less dense and much farther away from the city center than that of the San Fernando Valley. So, this line would not be unusual at all. And I can guarantee this extension would add tens of millions of more annual users to the metro. The G line already has around 7 million annual users, and remember, that's with all the red lights. Now imagine the service runs 30% faster, making it quicker when driving, and there's no transfer to North Hollywood, which usually takes around 10 minutes. Between the Sepulveda Line project and the North San Fernando Valley LRT, a light rail line between San Fernando and Van Nuys, clearly the valley is poised for rail. And to the point where these projects that combined will cost over $20 billion are very close to getting underway. But I think that between these 3 projects, this one might be the one that's most logical to do first. It's going to be a lot harder to convert the G line to rail once these other lines have built stations and platforms. And in the case of the Van Nuys Boulevard light rail, there will be much more ridership on that line if passengers have to make one less transfer to get to Hollywood and downtown. The fact that riders will have to transfer at Van Nuys and then again at North Hollywood makes you think that the line probably won't have that great of ridership, or at least will be so far off of what it can potentially do if the B line were to take over the G line. It's also worth mentioning that this project would offload a good amount of traffic on the 101, which has just been getting worse and worse. And so there it is. I haven't seen anyone bring up this idea before anywhere. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what definitely is true is that Metro has never uttered anything in relation to this. But I think it's a project that makes so much sense given just how strange the G line is and how it's a bus line that goes along a former rail alignment, and it's just so underwhelming in its service quality despite its potential. And switching to light rail would be both redundant and missing out on what is truly an amazing opportunity for LA Metro. As I said at the start, LA is having to fight an uphill battle of expanding and improving its public transit. But this project seems like the one time that something potentially really great has been laid out on a platter. 16 metro stops will never come this easy again. And this is important because LA is in trouble. The city is located in one of the most beautiful regions in the world with some of the best weather you can ask for. But you hardly have time to appreciate that when living here, as you spend so much time sitting in traffic on ugly highways and wide roads and parking lots. It's really a shame, but with the traffic problem in LA getting worse, not better, and with gas and car prices going up, the people of the city are ready for alternatives, but the alternatives just need to actually be worth taking. And if LA can get that right, this city will finally be making steps towards beauty and livability.